Do the other way. There we go. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started. Heavenly Father, we thank you for another day that you've kept us, another day that you've kept our minds. You woke us up this morning and started us on our way. Lord, we ask that as we engage in today's content, that you prick our hearts, prick our minds, so that we may develop a stronger relationship with you and understand what your purpose is for us in this earth as your children. And Lord, we ask that you continually pray for our nation, pray for each other, our communities, and Lord, let your will be done in the earth. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. So, lots of stuff. It sounds like, so on Wednesday, I was supposed to get out of an event earlier than they promised me, and I got out later than what they promised me. So I thank you guys for starting the video. It sounds like there's about 10 minutes left. Is that right? In the video from Wednesday. So we'll play that, and then I want to work through some of the things that were in the film with you, so that we can have a common understanding of what went wrong in this film and what went right in this film. Right. So we'll start with that. Any questions about this? All right. And then don't forget your papers are due on yesterday's experience. All the stuff is in Moodle, so it's the same kind of format for all of your experiences. So that'll be due. Yeah, so we'll talk about this, do that. Any other things folks want to talk about before I head long into? Yes.
I was just kind of curious. I kind of realized yesterday that why are we only talking about like diversity within the Black population?
Yeah. So.
I think there's enough experience that, like, where I'm going to be student teaching.
Yeah, please have a seat.
Where I'm going to be student teaching, there's almost 50% Hmong population.
Yep.
I have no idea.
Yeah. So. The way this class was particularly structured, there were, and we will talk about Hmong, and we will talk about some other groups, but the primary three structures that this class was built on was African Americans, Native Americans, and disabilities. So that's the three structures. We will talk about those other folks within the context of, and that's why if you didn't notice, I really tried to start off with this idea of talking about culture. Because if we can extrapolate from this piece, we can look at those other pieces in a more strategic kind of way, right? So,
yeah, I was saying I'd be really interested to see what you would have to say on that culture as well as maybe the Somali culture that is prevalent.
Yeah. So first of all, let me just ask this question: do you know why the Somali are here? Does anyone know why there are, no, let's back up. Hmong, let's talk about the Hmong first. Does anyone know why the Hmong are here? And I've talked about this. I did talk about why they're here. Does anyone remember?
They got pushed out of Vietnam.
So they were pushed out of Vietnam, sorta. That's part of it. I mean, there was a matriculation from Vietnam as a result of what? Sorta. But why? So why were they? Why was the United States in a war with Vietnam? Okay. So what about communism? The United States was afraid of communism. Now this is something I could not have taught you. right? So this is information that should have, through your matriculation in high school, we should have got this, right? So this idea that Vietnam happened, the Hmong people, so, and this is really interesting because this happens a lot, right? So you have these nation states. And the nation state says, well, I'm Vietnam, I'm Korea, I'm so and so and so, right? But then you have people who live, and these are the Hmong people. They don't particularly belong to a nation state, right? So they've always kind of been nomadic, they've always been in these areas, and then the nation state says, we're going to declare these distinct lines, and you know, and this is how we're going to do our thing. So one thing that was a push was that, first of all, the Hmong never really belonged to any of these people. These nation states, the nation states said they belong to us, right? So Vietnam happens, and we have this fear of China and communist rule going through Asia. Do we have enough soldiers to send over to Vietnam to fight the war? No, we don't, right? And so most of these soldiers that fought in Vietnam would now probably be around your grandparents' age, or maybe if you have older parents, maybe some of those guys served, right? And so, so what the United States did is we made a deal with the Hmong. We said, look, if you help us out, we'll help you out. Well, you help us out on the front end because we can't get into all these places. We don't know all these places, and we're getting our butts kicked. So they did something, they participated in something called the Secret War. Now, for those of you who study comic books or know comic books, you know that Marvel has taken that idea of the Secret War and, you know, okay, anyway. So we had the Secret War with the Hmong. So they fought alongside us. They gave us information. They did all this stuff. As a reward, what do we say to them? What could be the greatest reward that we could give an oppressed people? Come to the United States, right? Now, one of the things that we failed to do was when we told those Hmong people, so they went to not concentration camps, refugee camps. And so in a refugee camp, sometimes you can be there for a very long time. And so these deals were struck in the 70s. Folks were in refugee camps for almost a decade. And so some of the people here were born in some of these camps. And so when they finally get to the prize of the United States, who has forgotten the promise that was made to their parents, and in some cases their grandparents? The citizenry of the United States. We have no idea why these people are coming. We have no idea what promises were made. And so what do people jump to? What's that? So first of all, we have this concept of this illegal immigrant, right? Or these immigrants that are coming in, and you know, who asked them to come in? What we have to recognize is that whoever's in our country was allowed to be there. Whatever is happening in our country has been allowed to be there. So Hmong are here because of this promise that was made. And so because they forgot to tell us what that promise was, lots of folks said, they're trying to take over. They're trying to blah, 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 right? So and it's funny because University Avenue in St. Paul, anybody been up and down University Avenue in St. Paul, right? What do we know about the American system of kind of living? What gives you a good foundation for having a good life in the United States? What are some of the things that give you a good foundation? Money gives you a good foundation. What else? A job, right? What else? A good home, right? So when immigrants come, are they able to oftentimes go straight to the top of the American system of governance, or to live in the best of neighborhoods and homes and stuff. No, why? What's that? They've come with little, right? So in America, you come with little, you work hard, and you can work your way up to the top, right? So the interesting thing is, once people start moving towards the top, they start taking their stuff and they leave. So University Avenue is a great example of when immigrants come in to the country, they enter kind of at the lower rungs, so to speak, right? And so they try to work their way up. And so University Avenue, I don't know if you've noticed, but for a while, there were lots of Hispanic stores on University Avenue. I'm old enough to kind of remember some of the stuff. And now there's a lot of Hmong stuff. And now you're starting to see some Somali stores trying to make their rungs on that strip, right? And so sometimes we don't take those things into consideration, right? The same with the Somali. And why are the Somali here? Anyone see Black Hawk Down? Anybody seen that movie? Black Hawk Down? That movie will give you an anxiety. Like, I was sitting there watching, and just the hordes, right? So we're not talking about human beings. We're talking about like whatever. But the way the movie is portrayed, the guys are, in the helicopter, and they're like, yeah, and like there's just like so many Somali black people just kind of coming at him. And he's like, and you're rooting for the guy. Get them all, because they're gonna overrun you, right? So we get that kind of thing going in our heads, and the same thing is happening with Somali Americans. There was a civil war in Somalia, right? And so we saw that some of our interests might be in jeopardy. Who is next to Somalia that is a great ally to the United States? Who's next to Somalia? So Somalia, there's Somalia. What's next to it? Ethiopia. What's next to Ethiopia? Kenya, right? Kenya. So now here's the interesting thing, right? So all that stuff, that civil war is happening there. Boys of Baraka gets disturbed. Why? Because the Civil War. So the boys of Baraka, their experience gets messed up. And you'll hear them say things like, and I don't know if you know, is Osama bin Laden going to blah, blah, blah. So their experience in Kenya is directly related to some of the things that are happening in that part of the world, right? And so what we did was we went in and we started trying to do some refugee work. We're trying to help them solve their problems. And as a result, we said, those people who've helped us, we will reward you with coming to the United States. Putting folks in a lottery. And a lottery still happens today, right? And so folks get in a lottery and they go, oh yes, I get to come to America. And then they come here and then it's like, whoa! Right. And just like every other immigrant group, when people come to this country, where do they go? What kinds of places do they go to? Yeah, where their people are, right? I mean, it just makes it just makes sense that that's what happens. It happened with the Germans, it happened with the Irish, it happens with the Swedes and Norwegians. That's why the Iron Range is such a funny place, right? Anybody from up north that way, right? Yeah. So, there's still things between Catholics and Christians, right? So, so to answer your question directly, that's why, right? And we can get into these other pieces, and we will spend some time talking about those, given the rest of the class. But I also wanted to spend a lot of time talking about resilience. How do we build resilience? Because here's another thing that is extremely important for you to also recognize, that African Americans and Native Americans. Okay, so what I don't want you to do is get caught into the trap of multiculturalism as it relates to educational equity, because those two things are not synonymous. Example. So I'm on the board of ACAP, which is a community action program, and they run programs like energy assistance, Head Start, build housing in Anoka County, and that kind of stuff. And so I asked the board. I said, so we give multi-million-dollar contracts to build facilities, right? So to build housing, apartment complexes, all sorts of stuff. Multi-million-dollar. So this is, I mean, it's a lot of money. So I asked the board. I said, and again, I'm on the board, so I'm asking my counterparts in the staff. I said, I want you to make sure that there's equity in our contract dispersion, that minority owned businesses also are part of this pool, right? So I want to make sure that that happens, because sometimes it doesn't happen just because people are doing stuff quick. They go with people they know and blah blah blah. So I send this. So I say this in the meeting. And the staff is like, well, I don't know if we'll find any that are on this level, but we certainly will try. And so I said, great, that's one, just try, right? So we send that stuff out. And again, the difference between this idea of multiculturalism and equity in the classroom, this rang true for me. And I was actually floored when I found it out. So I sent them out to do that. They came back and they were like, well, actually, we found quite a few minority-owned businesses that can do these kinds of contracts. And I was like, oh, yes, great. But they had some puzzledness in their question, right? So they weren't like, here's just the facts, here, the top five. They were like, there were quite a few. And I said, well, I hear, I'm pretty intuitive. So I said, I hear in your question that there's something else that we need to know. And what is that? They said, well, that there are quite a few minority-owned businesses. And I was like, well, that's a surprise to me to hear that there are that many minority-owned businesses that can be, that's a good thing, right? And they were like, yeah, it is a good thing. And I said, well, how did this happen? Like, that's good. Like, what were the steps that were, and they said, well, what we found was that many of the contractors put their businesses in their wives' names. Why would that be something of interest? Why would that be interesting? Why would that change the demographics of anything? So who are considered so-called minority-owned businesses? People who aren't white, and who else? Women. So what did these contractors do who were male-owned and did not have minority or people of color ownership? What did they do? They ran the system, right? So they flipped it and put their wives on front. So what I'm suggesting is, we can talk about multiculturalism, which is where the Hmong would come in, which is where the Somali would come in, which is where the Hispanic folks will come in. But when we start talking about this idea of educational equity, we have to look at the statistics and the numbers. And we know that they're falling behind. But we know that there's a drastic and deplorable gap between African Americans with Native Americans and the white population. Like those folks kind of fall in those categories, and it's bad, but it's really bad when you look at those two populations, right? And we don't even get a chance, we don't oftentimes even talk about people with disabilities. Even here, it's so funny to even hear people not happy with what's the program that we have for developmentally delayed adults? The BUILD program, right? People are upset about the BUILD program. And I think that's interesting, that we don't want to give somebody who has an opportunity, who has the skills and could be successful an opportunity, right? I think those things are interesting. So when we talk about this idea of educational equity, particularly given the situation that we're in, the mandate that was given to me was to focus on primarily those three groups. And we will talk about the others because we can't not talk about them, right? But I also want to teach you principles that you can apply to all of them. So there was another hand I saw. Yes. Yes, sir. Was that your, was that, okay. Eating up all my time. You guys are good. I'm so tired of feeling. Another thing I will tell you is, or at least I'll suggest to you to think about, and you will hear people say this, and don't let them get away with saying this. They will say, I am tired of ... When do people get to be tired of something? When they don't want to deal with it. Right? So, football drills. We used to do this one with you. And what do they call it? Anybody done that drill? What's that? Up, down. So, boom, bam, bam, bam. Right? So if I'm doing up, downs, do I have a right to say, you know what, I'm tired of doing those? Do I have a right to say that? Okay, so I can say that, but I really wouldn't be in football. So I'm on the sideline watching people do up downs. Do I have a right to say, I'm tired of them doing up downs. I'm tired of watching them do up downs. Do I have a right to say that? Maybe I have a right. But should they stop doing up downs because I'm tired of seeing them do up downs? Probably not, right? Because so when people say, you'll hear people say this, I'm tired of talking about ... Well, are you on the field or are you on the sideline? So call people on their stuff, right? So there's that. So the assignment due, faith-based. It's due by April 26th.
Yeah, I saw that.
So it won't. So as long as you turn it in before April 26th, you're good. You're good. Right? So let's do that in 2 weeks. So let me fix that. That is funny. So let me make a note to myself. So that'll be what? What's the? Yeah, so 2 weeks. The 25th. All right, I'll make a note and do that. So, so there's that.
27, sorry.
Okay. 28th. Let me look for myself. Let's do it that Wednesday, the 20th. All right, we'll do the 28th. All right. Any other questions, comments, observations? You guys will be going into classrooms, doing some stuff, and I will be praying for you. You got a lot to balance in these classrooms. So I want to show this last 10 minutes of this film. So exactly where did you start? Did they have the emergency meeting? Or where'd you end?
That was right, we stopped right when they were ending.
Okay.
Right after they told them.
Okay. So just as a setup, as this is going on, why were they going to Kenya? To do what? For school, I heard something about better education. So maybe some behavioral education stuff, right? What was it like being in Baltimore? Yep, 76% dropout rate. What was the environment like? What's that? It was loud, couldn't focus. What's that? It was like the ghetto. Okay, cool. So not a lot of positive things going on in Baltimore, and so this program said, what will we do? Take you out of Baltimore, put you in a better setting, you get a better education, and then we'll bring you back. All right. So last 10 minutes of this.
If they have to stay here in Baltimore, they will be going back to their zone schools. And there's number I divide with payment. I can't take the bond from there, put him in a public school here. I can't do that. I can't do that. He's not gonna- I'm not sending him back to, help. Statistic that's gonna be out there. My child is gonna make, they're not gonna send my child back to Calverton, but that's his zone. If Barack is gonna let him down in Africa, it's gotta be a program to keep him together right here. I'm not gonna let him down like this. He's not gonna fall like that. That's bad. You sending him to that new juvenile detention jail. That's pretty when you send him to not my son, you send him up in jail. Not my son. I'm just sitting there watching 8 Mile. I think the phone rang. And I pick up the phone with the wrong grandma. She said, school might be getting closed down for the threats. I just stopped. I just went blank. I was listening to it, but I didn't know what she was saying. Why school was closed down? What threat? Who's threat was school? I'm like, ain't I know the dumb thing. Don't hate him. Get my way. I'm like, ain't no, you like, damn, like, they lying for them ones over there. I was thinking. And she was like, nah, she said, this is her. So, I was shocked. I'll be for it. I thought it was going to be different, but if not. I can tell them, Barack is not my future. I don't need that school for me to go to the gospel I want. They helped me for the first year, and I'm on my own now.
Bye, man.
That's the end of the day. Look at this. Look at the playground that they burnt down.
Jim.
He's not even going that fast. I don't believe they did this. Why did they have to do it right when we had to go back?
Why can't we go to another? Why can't we do it in the bottom? Another program. In another school.
It ain't gonna be the same. It's gonna be different because it changed part of our life. Anyway, it changed part of our lives because I know it changed mine. But
They only told us 1 year. I think all our lives in the day.
I don't believe that the school is up and jumped away from us like that. But it'd be amazing if they said, "What happened to you? Everything okay now? You can come back." But my dream ain't gonna come true. So I might as well just get that out of my head. Get up, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go class, get down there. My God, boy. Boy. Get you right there, boy. Stay there. That's all. You're not. You're not. You're not. What's going on? Fighting about me. What's going on? Don't bring out the rest. Nobody else but we got the real coming on me. But y'all know that. I'm tired of all this shit. This is my home. I worked hard to get this check. And you the fucking oldest. That's right. No, no, motherfucking yeah. I'm tired of this shit. That's your fucking old brother. Don't touch my child. Do you understand? Don't touch my child. Oh, you. What's your problem? You always want me. You dare tell me. You can believe that shit. Right? On your birthday, you get the hell out. But until 18, you mine. Drop it like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot.
I think you should be in another school. But that's just me. I think you should be in another school.
I should be in another school.
I don't see doing a whole lot of work. Let me see in the book.
I don't.
Let me see in the book. You gotta go to school every day. You gotta grade.
I might down a little bit. I'm not about work though. I don't want like down a lot of work. That's what you about work. I don't want.
So how you gonna get a job? This is the high school I want you to apply for. You go to Merville to get a car. I know Merville is a good automotive program. I know Papa has a good automotive program. I mean, you gotta think about it like, all right, I might not get to be mayor of Baltimore City, but I can work on cars. You can always work on cars and make some money. You know what I'm saying? You gotta look at it like that. Richard, I think he's at a point now where he could easily not finish school. Academically, I think he just says, forget it. You look at his face and it's just a lot of disappointment. You know, a lot of promises, empty promises, just running throughout his life. And I think if he makes it to 9th grade, he'll be lucky. If he makes it to 10th grade, I'll be shocked. If he graduates from high school, I'll probably drop dead with surprise. It's like there was no hope and there's nothing out there for him. Other than, they just failed. And that's the reality.
Stand on your feet and say, welcome, Brother David.
There's a word from the Lord today.
All right, yeah. All right.
They killed his body, but they didn't kill his soul.
All right, yeah.
Ask me how I know that they didn't kill his soul. Because when he was on the cross, he said, Father, into my hands I command my spirit. Somebody say, yeah. They put nails in his hands. They put nails in his feet. They did everything to Jesus. They tried to destroy him. They tried to kill his body. But the Lord gave his soul to God. I stop by to let you know. And then when Jesus comes, don't be afraid. For God can do all things. If you put your trust in the Lord. Somebody say yeah. I'm not ashamed to praise the Lord because he's good. Just leave it up to Jesus. Don't leave it up to people. Leave it up to Jesus. Hold on to faith. Hold on. Change is coming. I gotta let you know. If you put it in God's hands, he'll make a way. And I'm finished for the day. What I learned from my pastor is that I don't preach for money. I preach for the Lord. But since I'm starting my own ministry, I could use a token because it's still for the Lord. Amen.
I got the highest score on the math test in Maryland in the MSA. The highest besides me was a 397. I got 398.
It's a valued position to be here at Baltimore City College. You guys should give yourselves a big hand for being some of the top students in the city. We do have very high expectations. Don't just be happy that you're here. Don't just settle for the fact that, hey, I'm here at City College, I made it in. Look forward to graduating in the class of what? In the class of what? Okay, that's in 2008.
That's my last step to childhood high school right here. So, I'm trying to do real good. I think that people think a kid from Baltimore is supposed to grow up to be nothing. That we ain't got no future simply because we from the ghetto. So I figure I'm gonna try to make it different. How about I'm gonna be on the map?
So 3 kids in this story. Want to pay attention to Richard, Devon, and Montre. What was the difference between the 3 of them? They all kind of came from the same kind of background, but what made a difference? How were their experiences different? What do you think? So Richard went with his brother Romesh, and they were the ones that were fighting when they got home. Devon was the one who wanted to be the preacher, and Montre got the highest score on the math test in Maryland, on his entry test in Maryland. What do you think was the difference between the 3 of their experiences? Parental influence, all right. Other folks, yes.
Richard kind of despaired after the school closed and fell back into his old swing of things and back into kind of like we talked about falling into this stereotype, like, oh, I'm just back in Baltimore, I'm gonna fail again, and this is all bad. And after I started, the other boys kind of took from their experience and were like, I'm gonna be better than this because I've seen what I can do. And so they're not going to fall back into that place.
Yeah, they're not going to fall back into that place of despair, right? And what made the difference between? So why were those 2 boys able to do that, and then 2 other boys weren't able to do that? So parent involvement is one, right? What else? What else did you notice about them?
The other 2 boys had like a set dream, a set goal.
So they had the other 2 boys, Devon and Montre, had a set goal, had a set dream. It was interesting to hear what they said at the playground, right? So after they get the announcement that they're not going back to because you need to hear this from your students, right? And when you hear this triggers something in you. What did Richard and his brother say as they were on the playground? Spinning the thing. I feel like my life's going to be bad because what? Because the school? What about it? They didn't give us enough. That's what Richard and his brother said, right? They only taught us for a year. They didn't give us enough. That's not enough to da-da-da-da-da. But what did Montre say? Yeah, he said, they gave us a year. I got a year of good teaching. The rest is on me. So how is it that Richard and his brother said that that year wasn't enough, but Montre said that year was enough? Who was Richard and his brother looking for to save them? Somebody else. The system, the school, they will give us the stuff we need to get out of this. But what did Montre say? I got it now. They gave me enough to get out of this myself. Right? So when we talk about this idea of these, so there is intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, right? Extrinsic motivation means that I'm motivated by things that are outside of me. So money, cookies, candy, right? I mean, thinking kid terms, right? Intrinsic motivation says I do this because what? Yeah, because it's important to me. I feel it. It's a part of who I am, right? So when we think about, even if we just go down this kind of matrix kind of thing, right? What do we know about culture? What do people, how do we come up with culture? What is culture? It's an adaptation to the context, right? And so that's behaviors, thoughts, attitudes, feelings, and beliefs, right? So what was the context of pre-Baltimore? And we're saying pre and post-Baltimore, given the fact that they spent time in Kenya, right? So pre and post-Kenya. So Baltimore pre-Kenya for them was what? What was the environment like? It was a hostile environment. So what would the culture, what if you live in a hostile environment, how do you respond with the culture? Your culture is also what? Hostile, right? So play fight. Did you see that early in the film, right? And people banging on stuff and cussing and all that kind of stuff, because they live in a hostile environment. They've created a culture that is also hostile because of the environment, right? Education, important in that particular context? Not necessarily, right? Or it's not demonstrated in the context or the culture, right? So behaviors, hostile environment, hostile context, hostile culture. To Kenya, what was the context there like? What was that like? Was it different than the context that they came from, Baltimore? Yeah. In what ways was it different? Hostility was not allowed, right? What else? They had support from their teachers. They had an environment that said, you can do these things, right? And even if you can't, we can figure out how to do something. What was the summit? That's a clue. What was the summit of their activities in Kenya? Climbing the mountain. Now, climbing a mountain may seem like you get the clue summit. Okay, so I'm watching Jeopardy. So this idea of climbing a mountain, is it just about climbing a mountain? No, what was it teaching these kids? Perseverance. That they can achieve things. And ultimately the impossible thing, right? So from Baltimore, you tell a kid you're going to climb a mountain. That's the mountain you're going to climb. What are you talking about? But then when the kids get up to the top of the mountain, they're like, I did it, even without. One of the kids was like, I need more candy or something, right? He was like, I need some more snacks, right? No, but they did it anyway. So the context of culture, the context of Kenya required a change in their culture. Their behaviors change. Their thoughts change, their attitudes change, even their feelings about themselves and other people change, right? The kids who were talking about each other, not getting along, are helping each other up the mountain, right? And then they go back to Baltimore. Now, where did the school fail? Where did the school fail? Didn't teach them how to readjust. What else?
You can just land incident response?
No plan. You can't. So this is the most important thing as a teacher. You can't promise a kid something and not follow through. You can't do it. It's wrong to do it. Because what you do is you create, this is what happened with Richard and his brother Romesh. They had false hope. They had false hope. So if you say, as a teacher and every day, bringing donuts tomorrow, bring donuts. Follow through, build those connections, because not doing that is devastating to young people. Devon and Montre were able to take those experiences and make those internal and add those to themselves. So I would, and we'll watch a video in just a second. Imagine that Devon, and the interesting thing about Devon is he had an additional buffer. And what was that additional buffer that he had? Church. That was his additional buffer, right? And so I would imagine that Devon could take what he's internalized about what his abilities were, go back to the same situation. Because did anything change about Baltimore? No. But what did change for some of those boys? The way they see themselves and the way they see the world, right? And so this Pygmalion effect changed everything for them. How other people saw them in this particular context, they were able to carry over into that context. And what do we call that? We call that resilience. So what are we teaching our students? We're teaching our students how to be resilient. That no matter where you are, given a different context, because this stuff changes all the time. Context changes all the time. You have to adapt to different cultures all the time. But you should always know that you are the center of your choices, right? And so resilience. So I'm going to show you this quick thing on. And when I saw this, I was so elated. My heart just jumped. I was so excited to see this. Oh, come on. Well, I can't find the video. We'll look at it at another time. But Devon runs for mayor. He runs for mayor of Baltimore, right? And he talks about he created an ice cream store in Baltimore, and they give away a certain number of ice creams, whatnot, and he did not become a pastor, but he did become a politician, right? So he ran for mayor of Baltimore. So when we see these things, we see this idea of resilience. And so how would you define resilience, or how have you heard resilience defined? How would you define resilience? The ability to not allow your circumstances to shape you. What else? Yeah, pushing through whatever life goes. Have you had friends in your life when bad stuff happens, they fall apart. They turn into mush. Oh, I can't go on. Oh, Sex in the City is off. Right? No. Things like that, right? But then you have other friends who, really bad stuff can happen. It was so funny. So somebody was, I'll talk about my own life, right? So I saw my grandfather commit suicide. I watched it happen. Couldn't do anything to stop it. Watched it happen. The people in my family are like, how could, and they weren't there. They didn't see it, and they fell apart. Right? But I saw it. You know what I said? God, I'm glad that's not me. And I'm not going out like that. That's not how I'm going out, right? And I can kind of joke about it a little bit now. But no, because there was something in me that said, no, that was wrong. That was bad. Don't do that. Right? But it didn't break me. Right? And so there are other people who those kinds of things happen to. Why? Because they lack a sense of resilience. And so to get to this idea of resilience, or definition we can use, is simply to bounce back after adversity. Your ability to bounce back. Everybody has something bad that happens to them, but it's your ability to bounce back. And so when we talk about these kinds of structures, when we talk about educational inequities, ultimately, I can't change the experiences that my kids are going to have, but I can change my students to let them know that they can bounce back from them. Right? And so our students are going to face a lot of challenges, and we have to equip them on how to bounce back. So write this down. There is and I'll make sure that you have this, but the Search Institute has something called the 40 developmental assets. And I'll put them up on the board. I'll also make sure that you see them in Moodle. But these 40 developmental assets help to build this idea of resilience. So the first is this idea of support. And to no surprise, family is the first. Positive family communication, other adults and relationships, caring neighborhood, caring school climate, and parents involved in schooling. No, that's no surprise, right? That this helps to build resilience. When you have positive adults in your life, positive adults you are able to start to build this idea of resilience. The next developmental asset grouping is this idea of empowerment. And when we talk about empowerment, we talk about making sure that we give other people ways in which they can be actionable in the world, right? So climbing the mountain for those kids was way more than just an activity, right? It was teaching them about how they can be actionable in the world. Planting and gardening is less about the activity of putting seeds in the ground and more about what? The fruit you're going to eat, right? But more about the fact that you can be proactive in a process of creating something. So I think I've done a bad job of this as trying to model this for you, but your students really should be creating lots of things, right? And I don't know if you've noticed, like in Sunday school or maybe in preschool, they make the kids create a lot of little goofy crafts, right? What are those crafts teaching them? That they can create things, they can be actionable in the world. And so empowerment happens when you have a community that values youth, that they see youth as a resource, that those youth can be service to others, and they make sure that the young person is in safe environments, right? This falls along kind of what I consider the word I'm trying to figure out will come to me, but this idea that there are boundaries and expectations. And what keeps us safe? Boundaries keep us safe, right? So we're approaching winter, which I don't like, not so much because of the weather, but I can never see the lines. In parking lots, people park. How do people park in the winter? any way they want, right? Why? Because they can't see the lines, they can't see the boundaries. And so boundaries actually keep us safe. What are young people's jobs? To constantly push and test what? Boundaries. And so as adults, what is our job? To stand firm on those boundaries, right? Particularly the ones that keep them safe. And so families who have boundaries, who have, times for bed, who have times for this, that, and the other thing. You do this at this time. You come here and you call me when you're doing this. When they have those kinds of things, that's extremely important. School boundaries provide clear rules, which means that and consequences. Neighborhood boundaries, adult role models, positive peer influence, and high expectations. Creative activities, so forth and so on. And so these are all the external assets, as the Search Institute likes to call those external assets. And then the internal assets are this idea a commitment to learning, positive values, social competencies, meaning how to work with people, how to make decisions. Having positive self-identity is that last set. Because the other things that we should be asking ourselves is, because when kids have this, why is it that they need those things? Because there are these things that they're battling against, which we will call, and write this down as well, adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences. And there are 3 categories of these adverse childhood experiences, and you'll hear a lot of this, hopefully you'll hear a lot of this as you start doing your work in school. So we develop this resiliency because these are the things that are trying to diminish our kids, our students. So this idea of abuse, that's physical abuse, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse, right? So when those things happen, students aren't able to be their best. This idea of neglect, physical or emotional neglect. And then there are household dysfunctions like mental illness, incarceration of a parent, mother treated violently. Another way to talk about that is domestic violence, right? Substance abuse and divorce. And what we know is that any combination of these will lead to poor health outcomes. But can you also imagine what outcomes come psychologically if you're experiencing these things? Are you ready to give 100% best when you come to your school if no one has addressed any of these things? And I would suggest probably not, right? And that's why we need this idea of resilience. Those 40 developmental assets are extremely important. Make sure that I hit all the stuff. Yep, that's what I wanted to hit. And so, what we know about these is that this is good, this is healthy child development. So whether you're working with a Hmong student, you're working with a Somali student, you encounter these things, and you will have, particularly in our Western system, you'll start to see some results in helping them to be resilient in the face of all those things that they're facing, right? So there's that. I will see you guys on Wednesday. Please hit me up if you have any other questions, comments, observations. Enjoy. I did miss reading your reflection, so I'm excited to see this week's reflection. So I'll see you guys on Wednesday. That's great. Yeah, that's great too.
I enjoyed your shirt yesterday, by the way.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
question for you.
Yes.
For my, a couple of my reflections, sorry, I've struggled to like write. Can I use information from like the next week and put it in?
Yeah.
Okay, because
Yeah.
like I could write a lot about like the church and about like some videos that we've watched.
Yeah.
But, like some other things it's harder to get.
Yeah. No, that would be
And
wonderful.
then can I turn some of them in late?
Yes.
Then missing a couple.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really enjoyed the service. It was
Oh, good. Thank you.